for those of us who are caregivers, and I've spoken to a number of you here actually, who say, well, I'm in therapy practice, or I'm a physician, or what have you, the very real challenge of attending to suffering in our humanness can be exhausting. Yeah. How many people feel that when you are taking care of others, you may be in the moment activated. Everything within you is saying, this is what matters. And then you get home, things quiet down, and you feel fatigue. Just raise your hands. So, wow, yeah. Yeah. And certainly that's been my experience. So there is this midpoint, I think, between who I am as an aspiring yogi or practitioner in whatever tradition, and then the ultimate bliss that is waiting for us on the path. As a chaplain, walking into the rooms of patients in critical care mostly, or in the emergency room, it's hard not to get drawn into the visual. It's hard not to get drawn into bodily fluids leaking out on a mattress, or just the ugliness of being in this human body. And so we need a little bit of help in some cases. And so part of what I'm going to be talking about is a practice called strong back, soft front. And it's a very practical, simple mindfulness tool that originally was developed by the great Roshi Joan Halifax from the Upaya Zen Center in Santa Fe, who I've had the privilege of talking to and meeting several times and leading trainings there. And basically this practice is about how to turn around the responses that often we have in the presence of suffering, which, if you're like me, often what your first initial gut reaction will be to have a hard front and a weak spine. Right? This is natural. We protect ourselves when we encounter suffering. And so that's not terribly helpful for us, and can also get in the way of truly being present in an open, loving, attentive way, skillfully. So I think the brilliance of her practice that I've sort of taken, and then, I like to tinker with practices all over the place. And so it's a fluid practice and it's adaptable, is to turn that around and say, wait a minute, my heart can be fully present through a soft front by focusing in an embodied way on the belly, the softness, the generosity, the kindness of an in-breath, where the belly represents compassion. And it's supported in the back by the strong back, by the quality of equanimity. So we're talking about a nice, kind of almost sweet balance between stability, equanimity, as reflected in the spine, so that we can sit with stability, with strength, with confidence, with non-judgment, and with dignity, and support this heart that is forward-facing. Ultimately, of course, the heart is all-facing and no-facing at the same time. But here we're talking about engaging with someone who is suffering, and to really be open and present. This is, in a way, from the Buddhist tradition, what we call the bodhisattva, or the being who is enlightened through compassion, through seva, through service. So one of the things that I would often do walking into the room of a patient is sit there and have conversations. Well, what on earth does a chaplain do? Well, we support people, we meet them where they are. We don't pretend to have all the answers or problem solve, which can get us into trouble as well, and thinking that we know what someone else might need, unless we're their teacher or guru. And so part of it, as I mentioned earlier, is looking beyond the suffering to the divine within the patient that they cannot see within themselves because they are suffering. And in Buddhism, I often will think of it more as the Buddha nature that is there before me, It is the luminous Tathagata. Um, and yet, if I only focus on that, then I'm a little detached, perhaps, and in my opinion, not in a wholesome way, from the suffering that is presenting. So I want to also lean in and move right into that suffering with them, so they are not alone in it, and that I can hold it with them as a what we call a kalyana mitra, or a spiritual companion, wherever they are located, in all of their complexity. So we need tools sometimes to do that. I had an experience where my ex-wife had a very severe case of Lyme disease that had secondary infections in her body. She was a yoga teacher. She couldn't even walk, so she was doing her asana, lying on the floor with her feet on the baseboards. And I would go to Dana-Farber, to the hospital, and there was a period where 3 separate couples in their early 30s, one of the 2 in each couple was dying. Now, how do I not conflate all of that together? What we call emotional fusion, where my feelings about her were coming with me into the field, and now I was projecting that and my own experience, my own fear of losing her, as I'm witnessing these couples younger than we were, and one of them, and the grief and all of that. So these are in the world of caregiving, we run into that. But you don't just have to be a chaplain or a counselor. I mean, if you're a parent, you just want to be as the best mother, father, grandparent that you can possibly be, caring for your loved ones. And so part of this practice is really rooted in mindfulness practice. What we call the 4 foundations of mindfulness that can help us with proprioception. Has anyone heard this word, proprioception? It means that you're recognizing yourself fully embodied in this moment, in this space, and everything else just relinquishing. This is, after all, the truth. The eternal present is the truth, as opposed to reliving a memory that happened in the past. Yes, we carry imprints forward into the present, but we always have that freshness, that perpetual renewal of our spirituality in this moment to open and face and heal inwardly the things we're carrying. And the same is true with projecting into the future. It's very hard to make progress on the path if you're not present. The divine is here, not in the future, not in the past. Here and now, this is where the encounter happens. So that reminder, this is what mindfulness is encouraging us to do, is reclaim, remember, or the word sati or smrti, remembering. Oh, yeah, this is where it is, here and now. This is truth. So it's easier to access. So when we talk about proprioception, I'm here, I'm in this body, I'm in this physical form that is rooting me, I'm in this strong back of equanimity. Then I have a foundation where I can withdraw the senses inward. As we talk about pratyahara, just bringing our attention inward into what then is called interoception, right? The contemplation of our inner life. But we have a good foundation for it. We have in the Indian system this view of gross to subtle. Things aren't just so separate. This is part of the non-duality that I think explains, from the Samkhya and the yoga philosophy, these 2 very distinct things, explains sort of the bridge, the things that are very gross level. This is often where suffering happens, but it's also a place where stability, the good tamas, yeah, the inertia or the stability of being rooted in a practice, for example, and then the subtlety to the very refined, subtle quality of mind, of awareness, really. So, strong back, soft front. I have a note here that says baby screaming. Okay, let's talk about that. How many parents have gone into a supermarket, or you already know what I'm going to say, don't you? Uh-oh, baby, screaming, has a tantrum. No, you can't have those cookies. What happens if you try to silence it? What happens? It gets louder. Anybody recognize that in here? Those many voices? This is natural. This is what the mind does. When we try to subjugate, or control, this is why chittavritti nirodha is, sometimes translated as controlling, but really I think it's about sort of cultivating a sense of settling, right? The fluctuations of consciousness and allowing them to settle through a good disciplined practice. Very helpful. So controlling that child isn't really going to work. After all, it's probably expressing its need for agency, as does our ego, as do our thoughts. And so we need a different approach. We're talking about a relationship, again, the relationality of being like the parent on the playground and watching your children playing on the swings. This would be your sort of open, natural awareness, just bearing witness to these children playing, and they fall and they cry, they get hurt, they steal something from the other kid. They do what children do, and we can still hold that lovingly. This is how we can begin to relate to our own mind, because really, this is what we're witnessing. So where does compassion fit into all of this? Well, this sense of deep caring is sort of also a root here that the Buddha taught in these 4 foundations of mindfulness. We begin with the body. We begin with the breath. We begin simply where we are with this proprioceptive awareness and encounter the parts of the body. If you've ever done progressive muscle relaxation, some start at their toes, some start at the crown. You move through and you just soften. Awareness itself has this incredible power to simply change a part of you just by bringing that spotlight onto that part of you, whether it's a physical part or even an emotional part. It's the source of our transformation. So, body, the first foundation, we use that as a support. And it's amazing when your body starts to settle by breathing in, breathing out, doing your pranayama, how it can now become a mirror for what you're seeking to cultivate in your mind. The body is now quiet, it's still, the mind is still jumpy. Let's rely on the body as a teacher, settled. The mind eventually, after all, will settle on its own. The second foundation, feelings. What does this mean, feelings? It doesn't necessarily mean emotions, but it does mean sort of like the sensory feeling. Am I feeling agitated? Am I feeling easeful? Vedana is the Pali and the Sanskrit term, Vedana, for feelings. And just checking in. The Buddha says, and don't just observe your feelings from over here or over there. Observe those feelings from within the feelings. What is that training us to do? Noticing whether they're pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. We're learning, he doesn't say this explicitly, but my experience has been I'm learning how to sit within those feelings and bring some clarity. Tomorrow we'll be talking about purifying appearances, teaching by Padmasambhava, amazing practice. So feelings, we want to touch into them. We want to know what's going on here so that we can heal, transform, transmute, decenter, whatever words we want to use. We're relating to them with love, regardless of what they are. Mind, the third foundation. What is happening in my mind? What thoughts am I having? What narratives about myself, others, and the world am I a hostage to? I've just gotten in the back seat of the car of my mind, and who is driving it? It seems to be a different driver every 2 seconds. How is this happening? I don't want that Lyft driver. Mind, yeah. Cognition, also memories. And interestingly, emotions is part of mind in the classical Buddhist view. Truthfully, I experience emotions on every level. They're embodied, right? They are feelings, they are thoughts. There's a density to them, or there's an agitation to them, what have you. And then the fourth foundation, this is where the goods are, what is sometimes called Vipassana or Vipassana, insight into the nature of your experience by looking deeply, in the words of Thich Nhat Hanh, the great master, into your experiences of the first three. Oh, these thoughts are impermanent. They're arising and then they disperse. Another one comes. Okay, watching the flow. They're not as real as I thought. Who is holding this continuity of mindful presence and not needing to answer it intellectually, but deeply from the source? So we can practice strong back, soft front in 2 minutes, or we can really turn it into a longer contemplative session. So what I'm going to do is, I didn't even look at my watch to begin. How much time do I have here? Huh? 10 minutes, perfect. Okay. I'd like to guide you through a strong back, soft front practice as a very practical, Swami Atmarupananda mentioned the practicality. This is really sort of, in some ways, why we're here. The other thing I wanted to say, in line with our theme, I thought it was clever, so I have to share it, is the eyes open, eyes shut. What is the motivation for the eyes being open? The fight, flight, fear response. We can have wide eyes. Oh no, I'm encountering suffering. I remember once walking into the room of a patient who was vomiting blood, and I had such aversion that I ended up making an excuse to leave the room. That was not pastoral. That was not helpful. But I was really averse to it in that moment. Eventually, I collected myself, went back in. But that can be also this wide-eyed flight or freeze response, or the eyes shut, avoiding, denying. And we're talking about flipping that narrative, right? The eyes wide open, the clarity of our awareness, and the eyes shut, the quiet that comes by knowing the source of our divine nature. So that's what's also possible through strong back, soft front, perhaps. Okay. So let's get into a posture of practice. The main thing is your feet are flat on the floor, straight spine. Let your chin drop a little bit, lengthen the neck so that there's no pressure on the neck. Okay, we'll just do a short guided practice, and let's begin just by feeling the breath in, breath out. Just no need to change it or control it, but just as your breath exists, just encounter it as it is. And letting the mind just dissolve into the body like pouring salt into water. This proprioception of being here in this body fully, in this present moment, in this space. And just having a thought that your breath is round, not just in one place, but it expands gently as you breathe in through the nose. It gently reaches down, filling the abdomen, the lower back, the body. Breathing out all the way. So right away, there's a teaching here within the breath. Breathing in, I experience my entire body from within this body. Breathing out, I experience my entire body from within this body. Breathing in long, I know I am breathing in long. Breathing out long, I know I am breathing out long. And having a sense of opening the chest, the slight, subtle ascension of your spine as you inhale, just letting this upper body lift. And as you breathe out, maintaining that lift and letting the muscles, the flesh of the body just melt down around this upright spine. So we have this wakeful, easeful, embodied presence. This refuge. This spine. So naturally stable, like a mountain. This quality of non-judgment, of presence, of equanimity, even mind. Strong back. If the mind seeks to wander, to drift, let this be your stability, this strong back. The return to equanimity. And without shifting awareness away from the spine, let's instead widen your circle of mindfulness to also include your belly. Soft belly. So breathing down, feeling this lower abdomen soft, receptive, open. An expression of your love, your care, your compassion. Breathing in, breathing out from the belly. Soft front. And always, no matter how far your mind drifts, you are never outside the realm of your own spacious awareness. This awareness holding both gently, effortlessly, And so finally, just imagining yourself showing up this way, being present to someone who is struggling, suffering in some way with the strong backs off front, being available and open and stable. Easeful. Thank you for practicing this with me.